Hello everyone, my name is Tomi Olunuga, and I will be talking to you about why I think that women will undeniably be worth more than 2%. I want you to imagine a situation that's probably happened to you before, that your phone battery was on 2%. You'd probably panic. Well, now I want you to imagine that you've just thought of the most brilliant idea of your life, and you need to share it with someone. But your phone battery is still on 2%, and now less than 1. And, oh, it's dead. So, now you can imagine the panic of trying to launch a business with only 2% of funding available to you. This is the reality for many female founders across the globe who receive only 2% of global venture capital funding. That's right, according to the British Business Bank's UK Venture Capital and Female Founders Report, females only receive 2% of global venture capital funding. And it gets more concerning. Venture capital is funding that businesses might receive in order to grow their business in exchange for shares. Extend Ventures' 2020 report covered businesses from 2009 to 2019 and looked at over 4,000 UK-based small businesses that looked for venture capital funding. From this study, we know that Black entrepreneurs receive 0.25% of global venture capital funding. At 0.25%, your phone wouldn't even turn on, let alone power a successful business. And for Black women, this figure is significantly lower. It is 0.02%, almost invisible in the world of business. For every £1 of funding that might be received by entrepreneurs, all female founder teams get less than 1p. These statistics may sound morbid, but they are absolutely critical. Entrepreneurs aren't just facing a lack of innovation or a lack of tools, they are also facing and missing out on the funding that makes it possible to succeed in business. Can you quickly try and think of 5 white CEOs in your head? That's probably quite easy. Now could you try and think of 5 CEOs who aren't white? That's probably a little harder. Now, how about 5 CEOs who aren't white and aren't male? Notice how the pool starts to shrink. Finally, eliminate any post-celebrity founders. And what I mean by this is anyone whose fame may have come from something like a social media platform, or they may have started in something like basketball and then moved on to start their business. Did you notice that you had plenty of options to choose from when considering white CEOs, but having less and less option as we eliminated different categories? That's exactly the point, and it speaks to the systemic barriers in place. Entrepreneurs aren't just facing a lack of funding or a lack of tools, they're often not in the room in the first place, which means that they're not able to exercise their right on business or succeed in business. I think this funnel process is a funnel. So, for example, I think of it as a funnel, so it starts at 100% for the total number of funding received, and then 0.02% at the bottom. I want to make it clear before we look at it that in the UK, there are demographically more white people than people of colour. However, considering that the going statistic for Black female entrepreneurs receiving funding is 0.02%, the funnel should by no means be this small. So, here is the funnel. At the top, you have the total number of funding received by businesses, and then at the bottom, you have the 0.02% of funding received by entrepreneurs in the UK. There are, however, examples of people trying to change this narrative. For example, influencer and entrepreneur Grace Beverley. At only 27 years old, she has disrupted the fashion industry with her sustainable brand, Tala, with £50 while studying at Oxford in her bedroom. 5 years later, and with a workforce of over 50 employees, she has raised over £8 million as her net worth, and she's raised over £13 million in global funding. We know that women are 63% less likely to receive funding when they pitch the same idea as men, according to London Business School, which is one of the reasons that Grace Beverley's funding process is so inspiring. She uses her social media platform to raise awareness of the funding disparities in business, and she's also an angel investor, which means that some of the money that she makes goes back into supporting women-led businesses. We also know that she has featured on current affairs platforms, such as Bloomberg, to discuss the importance of female entrepreneurship. And she's featured in Forbes 30 Under 30, and has overturned legislation and helped to overturn it by visits to our country's leaders in Downing Street. So as well as the Forbes 30 Under 30 title, she has raised so much funding. In 2021 of December, we know that she raised £4.2 million for her first ever funding round for Tala. And recently, in July of this year, we know that she raised £6.5 million in funding. These numbers are obviously incredibly impressive, and they place her among the top women in the UK to have received such high numbers of funding. But this is clearly not the norm. In fact, in 2022, 86% of the UK venture capital funding went directly to only male founders. So, the funding disparities and the systemic barriers are in place, which mean that females and people of colour have less access to the funding, the capitals, and the network to be able to grow their businesses. In addition, we know that Grace has had access to many opportunities that many female founders or any entrepreneurs do not have. For example, her grandfather was a very successful property developer, and her social capital as an influencer beforehand gave her a head start. Additionally, she is white, which means that she has an advantage in a system which I've shown is skewed towards white entrepreneurs over their counterparts from underrepresented backgrounds. We also know that these are systemic barriers that limit the amount of access to funding for entrepreneurs. Another example of a change maker who is changing the narrative is Shalom Lloyd. She's a British-Nigerian trained pharmacist who started her skincare business after facing a personal struggle with her twin son Joshua, who suffered from severe eczema from birth. She's recently made BBC News headlines for her radical reimagining of what sustainable skincare can look like. Unable to secure any funding, she made the dramatic decision to leave a six-figure salary in pharmacy, and then she also decided to remortgage her home in order to find the funding that was able to be made. She started it from her kitchen table. In fact, within 3 days, she was able to make her what she knows as her Eureka formula, which transformed her son's skin and gave her an avenue to succeed in business. Today, she has over 70 women employed in processing plants and shea processing plants across Nigeria. And she has also received an award for sustainability in the environment. In May 2024, she received an MBE in business for her service to international trade and women in business. In fact, Shalom Lloyd's story shows that it is incredibly hard for people of colour and women to receive the funding that they need. Women shouldn't just have to remortgage their home or leave a six-figure salary to start their business. We need to make these opportunities available to all. There are, however, examples of people who are changing the narrative. And we know that there are also initiatives that are in place. So, for example, the Rose Review in 2018 found that there could be a £250 billion economic boost to the UK. This study was commissioned by the UK government, and it was led by NatWest CEO Alison Rose. £250 billion. This could obviously make an incredible contribution to the UK economy. There have also been initiatives that have been raised as part of this project, such as the Investing in Women Code. This allows for financial institutions to be encouraged to support and show that their funding processes are transparent by increasing access to funding for women in finance. And we also know that there are entrepreneurial incubators and microloans. Microloans are small grants that might be received by businesses, and they are a lifeline to underrepresented founders who might not have the traditional credit history or networks to prove their importance. So we know this works. Community Development Finance Institutions, or CDFIs for short, are a key part in allowing funding where the government is not able to. For example, every £1 of loan by a CDFI means that there's an estimated £4 to £10. And there are entrepreneurial incubators, as I mentioned earlier. These are initiatives that enable underrepresented founders and people from all backgrounds to learn more about business. It offers them mentorships and networks, and it also increases their access to funding. Sharmadean Reed is a Black British entrepreneur who founded the Stack World in 2021 and the Beauty Stack in 2017. You may have seen her iconic adverts, which are often pink, on the tube or on the buses. The Stack World offers resources to underrepresented founders and works similar to how an entrepreneurial incubator may work. Sharmadean Reed was the first Black person in the UK, women to receive funding in the UK, to receive over £1 million in funding. This is incredibly impressive, and she is an example of someone who's used her success in business to highlight how hard it can be to get there. So, we know that there are steps being taken, but there's still a long way to go into ensuring that background biases are cut from the root. I still believe that financial literacy and education needs to be better integrated into our schools, our communities, and our community spaces. We know that in the UK, Santander UK commissioned a project. 81% of 11 to 18-year-olds cannot name a single female founder, which is obviously incredibly shocking. We know that increasing and integrating financial literacy into schools allows young people to learn about business opportunities and to learn about financial education. Because entrepreneurs aren't just facing this lack of funding or the systemic barriers we've talked about. All entrepreneurs from all backgrounds are not receiving the financial education that's needed to succeed at business in the long term. A study by QuickBooks in 2019 found that 50% of UK small business owners have admitted to a lack of knowledge about management of debt, management of finances, or having the right financial tools to be able to grow or succeed in business. This is obviously incredibly worrying, and it shows that with the right initiatives and resources, we'd be able to stamp this out from a young age. In addition, we know that these financial opportunities are essential for every person of every background. So, I hope I've made it clear to you that women are undeniably worth more than 2%. I'll leave you with the question of what type of world we want to build. One where 81% of 11 to 18-year-olds cannot name a single female founder, or one that elevates everyone. We need to build systems that elevate everyone, regardless of their background. I want every child from every background to sit in a room about entrepreneurship and feel just as entitled to be there as their white male or anyone with a different socioeconomic status to them. Every child should have access to financial education. Every entrepreneur should have access to receive funding. And I hope that this concludes my talk with the idea that we need to build a world that elevates everyone. Thank you very much for listening.